Hello. So today we're going to go on a squash dig. And what this is I went to my garden and I picked out the squash plant in my garden that was doing the best. And I really wanted to know is why is it doing so well? It's doing much better than I have about 20 squash plants in my garden. And I wanted to know why this was doing so much better than all the rest of them. So in true archaeological dig fashion, I then killed the squash plant, dug it up, but I dug it layer by layer and to see what was going on in the roots underneath the soil and find out why it was doing so well. Now I had a theory about this and I wanted to test it, and I want to test the theory. The theory is I planted all my squash plants this year in hugel beds. These are basically, you just dig up the dirt, throw a bunch of logs in it, cover it with dirt again, and then plant on top of this. And I noticed that one is all my squashes have done much better every other year than when I've done it in just this thick clay soil that I have here. But I noticed there were some plants that were doing exceptionally well. One is I put a stump in a container plant, a 18-gallon tub, and put a squash plant on it. And this one was interesting because it never wilted. I put the squash seedling on it, and it's done fabulous. It's the best eggplant I've ever had in a container. And I noticed there was also a cucumber plant that I had planted from seeds in a hole. In the hole I had just dug a hole in the ground and put a stump in it and some branches around it, covered it up, and planted the cucumber seedlings. These also never wilted. Even in 100-degree heat, they didn't wilt as long as they were kept watered, and have done very well. So when I noticed these two instances, I decided, oh, I should test this out some more. And so I dug some more holes, and I put 3 more stumps in. I dug up an area where there were some cucumber seedlings that were doing very poorly because of the thick clay. And I put in 3 stumps and buried them, and put in a bunch of wood chips too into the ground, and I planted 3 cucumbers over it. And these ones too also haven't wilted. One of them wilted a little bit at the beginning, but then once it got established it never wilted. And they've been doing very well, and I've never been able to grow cucumbers in this area before, and I tried for 3 years. So the theory is that when you plant on a stump like this, the roots go down to it, they hit it, and they go across the top of it and then keep going down. And so that when you water it a lot, even the clay soil, this will absorb a lot of the water, so it'll prevent the water from becoming too mucky, and as it absorbs it, it leaves air pockets. And also when you, I've noticed when I've used wood as a wicking medium for soil blocks, that there's a layer of really nice roots that form and right on top of the wood. So I did that, I was growing transplants in a seedling tray, and I was thinking, well, maybe the same thing is happening under the ground. The roots hit it, form out, and this will absorb extra water, and then it'll wick back water as it needs it. So that's the theory, and I've been just really wanted to know, is this true? I wanted to see it with my own eyes. So I decided that, okay, I'm going to sacrifice the best squash plant we've got so I can dig it out and see what's going on with its roots. So let's go dig. Okay, so here's the plant. Now this zucchini plant was producing at least 3 times as much as any other squash plant, any other similar squash plant that I had in the garden. But in the interest of education, I chopped it down, and you notice that there were 2 plants here, and so I cut them off at the base, and I then raked away all the wood chip mulch that I had here. And what you can kind of see from these pictures here is that there's a lot of good lateral roots in the soil here. And that's one good thing about wood chip mulch, is it does encourage lateral roots, which if you keep it wet can really help the plant deal with high heat, and it helps prevent the plant from wilting when it gets real hot out. So I kept scraping away, and I found some branches here in the ground, and I dug those up. When I scraped a little bit further deeper into the ground, I came across these 2 little holes here, and I thought, oh boy, this is a clear sign of gopher holes. And so I dug away a piece out of that, and sure enough, it was a gopher hole, and I took out a piece of the hole here. And what I could see is that, these nice white roots were on the inside, lining the inside of the gopher hole, which was very interesting. Because what it meant is that the roots, roots like this are very healthy. That means they're getting just the right amount of oxygen and water. Inside the gopher hole was providing the ideal environment for these roots. And so I dug even some more, and here you can see
a picture of the gopher hole going in. And what was interesting is that the roots were actually just growing right into the hole, like in midair. It was like the perfect aeroponic chamber for these roots. And they were nice, very white, solid roots with lots of feeder hairs all over them. The top of the soil was very wet. It was right underneath a dripper, so it was providing just the perfect aeroponic environment for these roots. And I'm thinking, boy, this could be actually the reason this plant was doing so well, and not my original conclusion, which was the stump. So I kept. There's another picture of the of these roots, and I kept digging, and I pulled out more branches and stuff that I had dug in. And this is a branch that shows some mycelia on it. And one thing that was interesting is these branches is that the ones that had bark on them, even though the branches themselves were not rotted, the roots would get in between the bark and the branch and grow inside, because there was like a little air chamber in there for them. And you can see some very healthy, here I had peeled away the bark so you could see this very healthy root that was growing into this branch, between the bark and the wood. And here were some other logs that I pulled out, or branches. And these were ones that were put horizontally. I buried these ones horizontally, and so some side roots would get into them. So there weren't as many roots in these branches as I had thought, but there were some nice ones. And then here's I pulled out some rotten wood, and of course in the rotten wood a lot of roots would go into the rotten wood and connect with the mycelia there too. So I kept digging some more, and I found I got back to another gopher hole here, and here's I dug out a piece of the gopher hole, and you can see the nice roots that were growing on the inside of the hole. And I kept and here you can see the taproot of the squash plant was actually kind of growing down next to the gopher hole. And I dug away a side of it here, and you can see a really nice, you can see these really nice roots that are just kind of dangling inside. This was up and down, so these were just dangling inside the gopher hole, and just having a great time at it here. And I kept digging some more, and you get clumps like this every now and then where a lot of little feeder roots would grow. And I did finally get down to the stump that was below all these kind of branches, and this is one side of it. And I did see some of the roots had grown down the side of the stump, between the stump and the bark. There was bark over on the side of this stump, and I kind of peeled it away so I could get a picture of these roots here. But what I didn't see was lots of roots over the top of the stump. So this was a surprise, and it kind of negated my original conclusion. Like, there's the top of the stump. I kind of cleared it away. There were some roots in the dirt right above the stump, but by and far, it's not like the roots had hit the top of the stump and just really enjoyed it, like I'd seen growing, the little seedlings that I had growing on little wicking wafers. So this really just kind of destroyed the original conclusion that I had assumed was right. And then what I did find was another very interesting finding was that here we can see the taproot. What it did is it actually attached itself to a vertically buried branch that had bark on it. So I had actually buried a branch, that had bark on it, vertically next to the stump, and the taproot had actually gotten hold of that, and I guess it got enough aeration. It really likes, these roots really do like the bark, and just grew right down this branch, in between the branch, and actually went down and grew in between the branch and the stump at the bottom of the hole. So here's another picture of that, and it's a little hard to see in these ones, but there's actually, in the middle of that, the taproot is actually, attached, it's really firmly attached to some bark on a branch. And here, after I cleared it out some more, the actual, the crown of the squash actually, and the taproot kind of fell off the branch, but it was attached to this, and just to show, it was going down for quite a ways. And I actually pulled it out. I was able to pull the branch out with the taproot still attached, and the trowel there is at the bottom of the branch that was at the bottom of the hole, and the taproot went all the way down to the bottom of this branch at the bottom of this hole that I had dug. And so here was the stump, and like I said, there were no massive roots all over the top of it like I had expected. But there were, these roots that went, this is a piece of bark from the side of the stump. It was this mycelia and also roots that were growing down the side of the stump. And actually getting quite low. We're about, the bottom of the stump was probably about 2 feet into the ground. And also I picked up a lot of these pieces of its brown cubic rot. It's, I guess, wood can rot this way, and it becomes a really nice spongy stuff that will absorb water and also, when it dries out, provide little air pockets for the roots to grow into. And so here was the stump. In the top of the stump, I might say the soil, the clay soil, was damp, but it wasn't overly wet. So that that was a good sign that the stump may have been doing some wicking. So I was really interested to find out what the bottom of the stump felt like and what was going on at the bottom. So I flipped the stump over, and the bottom of the stump, it was really slimy wet. All the clay soil there was slimy wet. So this indicated the stump was doing what I expected and kind of wicking excess water away from the top and bringing it down to the bottom so that the roots on top, in the top portion of the stump, wouldn't become overly saturated. And so this is the this is kind of the end of the dig here when I was done. And here you can see the trowel is right next to the crown of the squash, and you can see that taproot. It's a really big long taproot. It's over 1.5 feet, and it just went straight down the side of this branch. And boy, this is it was very surprising for me. The conclusions that I had made turned out to be totally wrong. The new conclusions, I guess, and I could say from this is, if you want to grow a nice plant, well, be nice to gophers and encourage the gophers to come help you in your gardening, and also to bury vertical branches with bark on them. Boy, I'm gonna have to really reevaluate everything I had been thinking and doing here, and I'll have to do another video here on growing with gophers. Happy gardening.